Welcome to Navajo County Service Station. I'm Jason Whiting, Navajo County Supervisor, and I'm here with my good friend, Chris. Chris is going to talk to us a little bit about who he is, what he does, and some exciting things that are going on here in Navajo County. But Chris, if you don't mind just kicking us off, talking a little bit about who you are and why you came here and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thanks, Jason, for the opportunity to be here. I think in terms of who I am, what I've done, everybody always wants to know what kind of man you are. And so, I've got a wife, I've got a couple kids. One of the things that's really important to us is we live in a community that's got similar values. And so we've been all over the world. So I spent time in New Zealand, and that's where I met my wife. She's also an American gal. And we had kids there, and I was working in the professional industries, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that's kind of constant is as a family evolves and kind of starts to get to different stages, you're always looking to balance what you do, what you contribute every day in your professional life, to what kind of father, what kind of husband, what kind of community member you are. And I think that there's been an interesting path that I've taken with the family. And so when I was in New Zealand, I was working for multinationals, and I was doing senior operations for building supply and building material companies. So I actually had the opportunity to be fortunate enough to be a shareholder in a joint venture partnership. And our company was supplying pre-framed trusses and pre-framed walls, as well as all the building materials for commercial and residential industry. And so I did that for several years in New Zealand, and then went on and did an executive MBA. And so it was like, okay, the world gets a little bit bigger. Our family started getting a little bit bigger, and we went, and there was this opportunity to get involved with another growing multinational company, but in a very different sector. So I became a business development manager for the fastest growing courier and logistics company in Australia and New Zealand. So it was I shifted from operations into business development, working with franchise owners, franchisees, working on developing market share, profitability for those businesses. And it was a lot of travel. I was traveling all over the country, 4 days a week. Was on the road, meeting with business owners and customers, and doing that work. And then our second daughter came along, and I was like, well, geez, I need to spend some more time with the family. And so I went back into operations. I became a plant manager for a large manufacturing business, and we ran 24/7, and we were making engineered timber connection brackets, and we're selling those all through Australasia. And a lot of people here in the US would know those as like Simpson timber ties, right, or lumber ties. And so we were making those and selling those, and it was all good, kind of working toward like quarterly returns and KPIs, and it was a fast-paced industry. So I really appreciated that. Then we got to the point where we said, you know what, we want our children to know their grandparents and be close in the good years. And so our kids were, 1 and 2 years old, and we actually repatriated back to the United States. And so we ended up in some neutral territory, not in Colorado where I grew up, or not in Oregon where my in-laws are from, but we ended up in northern Idaho. And so I actually kind of did a little bit of soul searching and decided to take my skills and put them to work in a different way. Rather than profit and quarterly returns, it was more about what can we do to make things better. I was doing a lot of volunteer work in New Zealand, right, trying to balance things. But then when I got back to the United States, I got into the small business development and lending industry. So I got a job as a director of a U.S. Treasury certified CDFI. And for those that don't know what a CDFI is, it's a community lending institution. So it's a nonprofit lending institution. And as director of that CDFI, we did small business lending. But there's another whole component that goes into that. If you're going to make loans to businesses, you need to know that they've got business plans and all of the their financials and their operations at a level that's they're going to be able to take on these loans and make repayments. And so we had a women's business development center. And that was also sponsored by the SBA. So we had an entire team that was working with business owners to help them do their startup. And so we kind of do coaching on marketing and cash flows and operations, and then also pair that with financing. And so I was doing that in Eastern Washington, actually in Spokane, with a nonprofit group called Spokane Neighborhood Action Partners. Okay. So that kind of then brought me into this game of business development, economic development. But then about 6 years ago, we moved to Coconino County, and I took a job as economic development manager in Coconino County. They had never had anything happen before, so they wanted somebody who could come in and start a program for their county. And so I took on that challenge, and it was about transferring those skills in finance and business development and business startup lending, and kind of working at a different level, but for a government agency, right? And that was my first time working for a government. And so I did that for 4 years over in Coconino County, and it wasn't until I actually saw how the people are in Navajo and Apache County that I said, that's the answer to our prayers. We wanted to be in a place where we found our people, right? And our kids are growing up; they're going to school, getting involved in sports. We're kind of looking at this as a family unit, and transferring over to Navajo County as their economic development director and as executive director of REALAZ, and I'll talk a little bit about that if that's okay at a later stage. It was once I started working with the folks that are here on coal community transitions, that I figured out this is the place. And so when the job came up, I'd known about it for a while, but it wasn't until I had met the people that I was convinced that this is where we should go. And so my wife and I, we spent some time getting everything together, and we made the shift from Coconino County over to Navajo County. So that kind of brought us to this place. So I've been in the saddle for 2 years here as executive director for REALAZ and economic development director for Navajo County. And it's been a great ride. It's hard work, but there's some really good things happening. But really what that comes back to is the quality of the people. It's always the people that make good things happen. And I'm seeing that. And I'd love to talk to you more about that as we go, but that's kind of a little bit of history in a nutshell.
Well, thanks for sharing with us. And like you said, I mean, it definitely is a great area, but we're very fortunate and lucky to have you and your family here and a part of our communities. You really come in, and it seems like it fits very well for you and your family, and you've blended in and are part of the community. So thanks for being here. Thanks for the great work you do. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that work you do. I want to talk to you about economic development. And obviously, you and I work together, and I have an understanding of that. But sometimes I don't know that our citizens always understand what exactly that means. I mean, I know they know that we're talking about jobs, we're talking about opportunities, but sometimes I think there's some confusion as to what that is. I'll see things where people are talking about economic development as if the cities, towns, or governmental entities have some kind of a catalog that they look in and order what businesses the communities want. And that's just not, or maybe it is how it works. I don't believe it is. But Chris, why don't you tell us a little about what is economic development? Kind of how does that work?
Sure. I'm smiling about that. I had this conversation with my 11-year-old daughter this morning. She said, "Dad, we need more places where we can shop." She's like, "Do you like my shoes?" I said, "Yeah, they're good." She's like, "Yeah, you need to bring in more shopping, clothes shops." And I was like, "Okay." And I think that illustrates the point of when people think about jobs, they often think about the things that they buy. And those are the type of businesses that people want. But really, when you step back and look at economic development, and I'll kind of break it down into two ways. You got B2C economic development. So that's business to consumer. So B2C, so think of like fast food joints, supermarkets, right? That's a B2C business. And then you also have B2B businesses. So that's business to business or industry anchor businesses. And those are the guys like a sawmill, right? They take the resources, mix it up and then sell it to other businesses that then sell it to consumers, right? So when you're thinking about economic development, there's really kind of a couple things. And I always lay it out like this. So B2C businesses, those are the business consumer businesses. They always go to where people are. Okay, so they follow people, and you can see that here in our communities. Why do we have so many drive-throughs? So why do you have so many tire shops, auto glass stores? Because we got a lot of people here that are driving. Those businesses come to where the people are. Supermarkets, same thing, but they don't base it on the number of drivers. They base it on the number of rooftops, right? So the bigger your community is, the more rooftops are, the more B2C retailers you'll get. And I mean, that goes for clothing shops as well. So they look at the community and go, hey, is there enough for us to support our business? And let's talk about food industry. Supermarkets are, everybody goes, well, bring us a Costco. And I said, well, once we get 80,000 homes in an area, in a concentrated area, they will come. And you see that happening all over the place. You don't just get in the catalog and be like, Costco, hey, I've got a place for you. Come on down. They're like, yeah, you've only got 2,000 homes. Like, we need many, many more than that. But the Dollar Generals, right? They can base their business models off of 2,000 homes, right? So the point is that the B2C businesses in retail go to people, all right? So that's B to C. And then we talked a little bit about the B2B, so the business to business. So those are kind of more the heavy industries. So think like the sawmills that we see here, the power plants, the old paper mill, right? Those are the big industry employers, right, that are employing hundreds of people. Those businesses don't go to where the people are, they go to where the resources are that they use to then create value. And people will then move to those areas, and they'll choose their community, but they'll go work at those B2B industries. So this B2Bs is what we're seeing a lot of here. But really, it's not about anything other than for them being close to the resources. You look at where our sawmills are, they're kind of out of town, they're close to the forest. You look at where our, some of our big industry is, they go to where the resources are. People go to them. The B to C, the retail guys, go to the people. So it's like you kind of have this progression. So you can't just like skip ahead. But the other important thing to know is with the B2B businesses, the big industry, right? You bring in some of those guys, and then you have mechanics or machine shops or HVAC guys. You have suppliers that come closer to those anchor industry businesses, right? Those big B2Bs, and they create jobs as well. So you start to kind of get this this growing effect, right? But really, when you're talking about rural economic development, which is what we are, we're not urban. We really got to kind of understand that there's this B2B need. You bring in the big employer, all the other ones come. More people come, you start building more houses, and you get more B2C or more supermarkets, clothing shops, those types of businesses. And so I think that in simple terms, it's helpful to know that when we're talking about economic development. Everybody hears it on the radio, they hear it on TV, and so they lump it all in together and like, oh, well, economic development is getting a better road to my house, because it will help me get to work quicker. And it's like, well, you might think that, but that's not truly what economic development is. And especially in a rural area like Navajo and Apache counties, it's not all about the B2C, which is what everybody actually wants, right? They want more shopping choice, they want more items. But so you kind of have a progression. So that's the best way I could sum up economic development, so people can kind of understand, hey, there's different parts to economic development. But when you're doing economic development in those different areas, either B2C or B2B, it takes a different skill set, a different set of resources to help those. And I'd love to talk about that if you're interested.
So no, absolutely. And thanks for doing a tremendous job of kind of going into detail, explaining kind of the differences between the different types of businesses and how that works. Did a really good job of explaining that. If you had to do it in 30 seconds and say, hey, this is what economic development is in a nutshell, what would you say?
I love this question. This makes it challenging because I'm going to tell you what, as an economic development professional, what it is, right? Everybody else is going to have their different ideas. Economic development in a rural community is all about industry attraction, because once you have industry that's here, then you start to get more of the businesses that come around. You start to get more of the job opportunities. So it really is about industry recruitment, industry attraction.
Perfect. So then that leads into kind of my next question, is talking about how you do that. How, if that's kind of the crux, and we do have businesses that are here, but if that's the starting point to where it grows and expands from that, kind of explain to us how you, as you got here, inventory what's here, and then look at what's the game plan and how is that developed? So when you look at an area like ours, which is 20,000 square miles, that's as big as some states, right? So 2 counties I'm talking about, Navajo and Apache County. When you inventory the assets that are available,
you got to look beyond what is in front of you, because if you go out anywhere and a couple miles in any direction, you'll just see more and more land, right? But when you're thinking about the assets that industry wants, is they want location. So for logistical purposes, they want access to that with transportation. So rail, interstate, highways, right? That access is really important to this vast land that we have. But then you start to break it down a little bit further, and they go, okay, well, every business needs, electricity. We've got, with every business needs water. Some businesses need gas. Most of them do. But then, so you got to look at the resources that are available. When you look out and you don't see any water, you think, oh, it's impossible. But why do we have 3 of the largest power plants in the state in our region? It's because there is water there. What have those power plants done? They've also created transmission lines, which is another form of an infrastructure asset, right? We've got lots of private landowners that are looking to do well for their families with that land. So you kind of cover this off, and you're like, okay, we got location, we've got land, we've got infrastructure, both transportation and electricity, right? We have some limited gas in our area. But then the other piece that's new, that's starting to kind of change the way or the trajectory of our region, is the broadband infrastructure. So, several years ago, the Board of Supervisors in both counties decided broadband's a priority. That is almost like a utility, right? But how do we spark that up? So we've seen that the Middle Mile Broadband Project in Navajo County is also one of those assets that are attracting these industry players, because they're all interested in utilizing those resources. Our land has, good wind. It has, lower temperatures. It has good solar radiation, right? We've got transmission lines running across it. There's ability to get to it because it's private. So we're seeing a convergence of industry coming to those resources. And I think it's important to understand that that's what we have. And it is actually very unique. When you look at maps of the entire state and start overlaying these layers, you start to see this little triangle that's in northeastern Arizona that has the availability of these resources, right? And so that's the way I like to think about our economic development.
So you've done this inventory, and you've talked about kind of unique what's available inside that triangle, as you described. What are the businesses that you're seeing, or maybe a success story that you've seen inside that triangle?
So everybody's aware of all the energy transition that's going on here. The coal-fired power plants are transitioning to other forms. They need all of the above. I mean, they're looking at natural gas. They're looking at solar. They're looking at wind. They're looking at long-term battery storage. Energy is a piece that continues to drive. And one of the secrets, and it shouldn't be a secret, if in economic development, if you want to play in the world of economic development, that means growing more jobs, bringing more opportunity to the locals, you have to have electricity. If you don't have electricity, you're just cooking with sticks and logs, right? And so the fact that we've got that availability and that transition going on is driving a lot of that renewable energy and alternative energy growth. People are talking about nuclear, they're talking about gas, they're talking about all of the above. And they're coming to the areas that have those resources that I mentioned before. But let's talk about another industry that is come to us for a little different reason. Yes, there is power. Yes, there is water. Yes, there is gas for them. But I'm talking advanced manufacturing. So we've had a modular home manufacturing group that has worked its way here over the last year and a half. I've been working with them. They finally built their land. They're developing their workforce and their shop. A lot of people know them as Zenny Home, right? But why did they come here? And this is the question that everybody's like, well, why do you employ 500 people in the middle of nowhere, right? It's all about the resources. And when I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about location and proximity to the markets they serve with rail access and highway access. They have water, they have power available, and they have land, right? And so all of those things kind of came together for this advanced manufacturing home group to land just outside of Snowflake Taylor at the old paper mill. But you can't get those guys without kind of coordinating and kind of working through all the complex issues, because they aren't a B to C type business. They develop for homes that they sell to, residential development companies that, put out hundreds of these things in neighborhoods all across the country. But that example of Zenny Home, I'd love to talk more about it because it's really a complex and fascinating development that we've seen here. But there's good reasons why industry like that would choose Northeastern Arizona over other locations.
So you described Zenny Homes as kind of, your words or what you've taught me here today is it's B2B is what they are, that type of a business, which brings jobs, which then brings, the other types of businesses into the area. So that would seem to be a positive. Let's talk about that. You called it prefab homes or something along those lines. Why? Because I've had people ask these questions, so I'm going to ask you them. What's the difference? You have manufactured housing, and those have a way that those are valued, a way that you can get loans for those. And I understand that these are treated differently. Why?
So the homes that this company is creating are built to IBC 2018 standards. So they aren't the HUD homes or the modular homes in the sense of they come on wheels, right? And you can back them in. These homes are built to all the current building standards. They're smaller, right? So the affordability of them is increased. But one of the things that they've done that's unique with their model is not as much as what the 2 points are. They can get conventional lending because these are built to conventional IBC standards, right? They're a little bit smaller. They do get completed in a factory. They come fully fitted out, and then they're either trained or trucked to a location, and then dropped onto a concrete pad, hooked up into the water, the electrical, the sewer infrastructure that's available. And but one of the things that they're doing to meet the market is they're using car manufacturing techniques, right? So it's not a bunch of builders that are sitting there hammering away and putting up drywall. They're building it as, so if you almost think of a car assembly line, the frame gets built, then you kind of get subcomponents, bolted onto it. Then you got, wiring looms that are put in, and these are advancing through a factory. So when you're thinking about the manufacturing techniques they use, these are advanced manufacturing techniques. They aren't traditional construction, although they are built to the same standards as traditional construction is, but they're just doing it at a higher volume. And so that allows them to reach the market at a lower price point, right? But also have the ability to get traditional financing.
Why is that so important? Traditional financing versus the other. Why does that matter?
So at the end of the day, families need to be able to afford their rent or afford a mortgage, right? They oftentimes banks will lend you more money than you can reasonably pay back as a mortgage payment. But the less that you borrow, the lower your interest rates are, right? But also, the longer you can borrow that money for, the lower your repayments are, right? So 15 years versus a 20-year versus a 30-year are going to have different monthly mortgage payments on that loan. So that's why this is important. People can opt for 10 years, or shoot, I'll buy it cash, or I'd like to work a little bit further out into the future with the traditional family homes, maybe a 30-year mortgage. But I think it's really important because that is what determines how much it costs for a family to be in a home, is how much you borrow and how long you have to repay back.
No, and I think that's such a big deal with these. And as talking to the company about it and what they were doing, I thought right away when that was shared, I thought this is pretty fascinating for that reason, because it's different. It allows them a different opportunity as far as homeowners to be able to engage with affordable housing, which there's a national crisis. I would say there's a global crisis with that. Fascinating, though. I really appreciate this conversation. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that if you're okay with it. I want to dive in. So we talked about why it's different, that they can actually get traditional lending on side of it. We also talked about the building standards that they're held to, which is a different, because people get confused the difference between these and maybe some of what they've seen as prefab homes before. And so you've done a good job explaining some of those differences. You also, though, talked about the business model of Zenny Homes. And I think there's some confusion out there on that, and that maybe we can clear up a little bit. But the more I'm hearing you talk about it, it sounds like their business model is to manufacture these and sell them at a national, if not global level. They're not looking to be a developer. While they may do some of that, that is not their trajectory and their business plan is. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Do you mind clarifying that a little bit?
So I think Zenny Homes is like a Ford or GM manufacturer. They build the vehicles, they build the homes, but they aren't selling them to the consumer. They're selling them to where you go to an auto shop, or a car dealer, right? And you look at all the models. It's the car dealer that's actually selling you the model or the vehicle that you want, but it's built at a different location. So the Zenny Home is what they're doing is they are building them in a location here, but then selling them to the residential developers who then sell them to the customer. And they say, oh, do you like this model, that model? We'll sell you, the whatever type and put it into your place. So I think that when you look at their business model, it makes a lot of sense of why they've chosen our region, right? They've got all the resources that they need, the power, the water, the location, but also they've got the infrastructure for transportation, which allows them to serve all of the lower 48, right? They can get a home built here to New York City at low cost because it goes on a truck to the train, all the way to the site, then they move it to another truck and they crane it off directly onto site, right? And so that is something that is built into their model that allows them to build it, but to sell it to other businesses that then sell it to consumers.
See, I think that's fascinating. I've heard, I've sat down and had conversations with contractors who have talked about this it almost seemed at the time very futuristic, but like that was the path. Like in the future, this seemed to be where it was moving, especially when we talk about affordable housing, that there would be these opportunities. Because as you can imagine, or at least what was being shared with me, that the population is becoming much more transient and moving and not wanting to necessarily be in the same house always. So this would align with that and allow for affordable housing with traditional lending and being able to do. And so it could potentially be a wave into the future of what we're seeing. And this could be at the beginning of that, because they've talked about it for a long time. I know that this is being explored globally. You talked even a little bit about your previous job and some of those things that were happening, and now it's happening right here. So that's pretty exciting for our area. Just what are they talking about in the way of ramp up in terms of jobs? What does that look like?
Sure. So before we get to the 350 jobs that they're trying to hire for this year, there's this whole backstory, right? How do you attract industry that is of this size, right? So about a year and a half ago, as I was talking to the owner and the founder, and he says, Chris, we're looking at some options to build a new factory, right? And I'd like this option here in Navajo County, but you need to prove to me that this can work for us, right? And so we actually started working on this. And what's the neat thing about this story that not a lot of people know is this was actually an old brownfield site. So this is the old paper mill site. So this was a tax lien property that the previous owner had not paid property taxes on for 7 years, right? And so it was coming up for tax sale. But there was a lot of problems with it, environmental challenges that needed to be addressed in order for anybody to buy it, right? Because they're not just buying the land, they're buying all the whole ball of wax. So part of this process was looking at this land and going, okay, how can we make sure that this land is productive? How do we clean it up? How do we make sure that it's safe, right? So there was many conversations that went on before we were even talking about buying this, about what are the pathways to making sure this is a safe and environmentally sound piece of land, right? But so we worked through with many of our partners, with the ACA, the Arizona Department of Revenue, the CSA, that's the County Supervisors Association. We were working with DEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, to try and unpick this and figure out how can we take this environmentally challenged site and make it productive, right? And we needed to find a pathway. And it took us many months to find that pathway. But once we had that pathway established, the other thing that they asked about is they said, hey, Chris, we're going to need up to 1,200 jobs in the next 5 years. So I said, 1,200 workers? Really? Wow, that's much bigger than anybody we have here. And they say, well, can you provide us with 300 in the beginning and then another 600, right? And then we'll keep growing from there. And So one of the things that we have to do in economic development for industry is prove that we have the resources within and the willingness within an area to supply them what they need when it comes to workforce. And so we were able to, show them studies and feasibility studies. And these are available for anybody that would like to know this, because this is really important. We say, okay, construction workers, manufacturing workers, how many do we have in the region that would be willing to commute to the area or to that location? And so we were able to prove to them that we'd have the workforce. We solved for the land issues. But there's also some other factors that play into this that kind of go up another level. So it's not county or local, but there's also federal levels of incentives and state levels of incentives. New market tax credits, right? So lands that have the ability to for investors to get those new market tax credits. That property that we're talking about happened to lie on the area and was within the boundary for these new market tax credits. So it's like you kind of need all these things to align: workforce, land, kind of the resources, as well as what the state or federal kind of incentive overlays are. And so that's what takes a lot of the economic development work. That's why having a economic development professional working with your industry is really important, because they aren't going to go around making all these calls, or they don't know who to call. They don't know the people. But when they know somebody who knows them, it makes it a lot easier, so you can line up all those factors for a decision to be made.
I feel like, thanks, Chris, for sharing that. And I feel like what you're talking about here is, in short, is partnership and being credible and building that credit with these partners, so that when you pick up the phone and make a phone call to them, they take the call and want to work with you on it. And I have to give you some credit here. Not that it's hard for me. It's pretty easy for me to give you credit. But in 2 years, you've been able to leverage the existing political capital, we'll call it, that has been created, and your own credibility. And the speed of trust has been fast with some of our partnerships. But we've been talking about partnership here. So with those partnerships, do you mind talking a little bit about that? I know that this is what I want to specifically hit on, though, Chris, is this. Because sometimes I think people, as we're talking about economic development, you have Group A that really wants this industry here, and Group B that doesn't like that. They hate that industry, and they want this other industry there, and Group C and Group D. Being a credible, trusted partner to the business community matters. And if we're all over the board on how we show up for the different businesses, does that impact them looking in the area? And what is your recommendation on the best way of being credible with partners, so that the speed of business can happen? And when a business shows up and we need to move the needle, we can do it. A lot of questions there. Have fun with that.
So in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of wins, but this all comes back to the framework that the founders of the economic development group, REALAZ, laid, right? So about 15 years ago, the community leaders, the electeds from our local governments says, hey, we're all interested in development, but we don't have the budget to do it on our own. So we need to leverage our funding to start to build that credibility and have that kind of that attraction piece, right? And here we call it REALAZ. So that's the Northeastern Arizona's Economic Development Group. In the last 2 years, what we've seen is that group went from 20 members that were attending to over 50 members that are actively engaging. But the reason that we keep growing is because they want to know who they need to know, but they need to know them in person and build those relationships in person. This stuff isn't done by watching a video or taking a phone call. This is stuff that happens in person, right? And so that partnership and that credibility really comes down to the framework that the founders laid. I've just been fortunate enough to come in and have a framework, have the willing partners, from our local jurisdictions, all in the same room, going after the same economic goals of attracting industry, right? And so that's really kind of helped to narrow our focus. But I think that there are different groups within REALAZ, and they all have different insights or different focuses, but this is where the strength lies, right? And this is how we can, connect up with these businesses and meet their needs. So some guys are interested in workforce recruitment. So we've got, several members that's what they do. They specialize in it. Arizona at Work, right? Grow Arizona. They are all about workforce recruitment. Then we go, okay, well, what about workforce training, which is a little bit different, right? That's where we have our members like Northland Pioneer College, right? We have the academic institutions, of NAU, ASU, that are all members that help to support that workforce training component, right? You have the local government representatives, and those are the local gavel holders, right? So they are there as well. But we've also got the other businesses and organizations that supply materials that can do marketing. We have promotional companies, right, that are all members that can help with that effort, regardless of whether it's a tourism piece or a small business, business B2C, business. We've got those folks there. But another thing, and I don't want to cut this short, is there we have the B2C guys, right? The business to consumer guys. So within REALAZ, we've got the Small Business Development Center. You heard me talking about the Women's Business Center, right? We have one here that's low cost, no cost to any businesses that's looking to expand, right? And they'll dig in deep with you on what you need to start up your business or get it going. We've also got the chambers of commerce, right? So those are important partners that new businesses or expanding businesses need to know, right? And this is a place where they can engage with them and follow up. We also have the Arizona Commerce Authority as one of our members. So they've got an entire suite of tools for optimizing businesses, profitability as well as startup. I'm putting a lot of things out there, but one of the things that is important for people to know is, regardless of what business interest you have, check out one of our members, because they will be the people you need to be working with. It might be me, it might be the Small Business Administration, it might be Arizona at Work, could be some of our tech companies or our earth moving companies. But these are all all of these resources. We've got them online. People can go check them out at the website. If they don't know where to start, just start pulling a string, and it will lead to the next person. But it leads to the next person. But the key is knowing that person, being close to that person, and actually having a relationship with that person. That's what REALAZ's foundation has set. And that's why we're seeing these accelerated, movements with industry here.
So getting the right tools and assets available in the toolbox for industries that are coming here. You talked about being able to get a hold of, since we have you here today, if there's a business owner, an entrepreneur, somebody that's looking to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? So
they can always call me. I got a phone here, and I say this, leave a message. I get a lot of calls. Everybody gets lots of spams, but 928-241-8414. That's 928-241-8414. Give me a call. You can always check out the website, but I will call you back. That would be a good, easy start, right? Or if you know somebody that is also a member of REALAZ, just talk to them, right? Because you don't want me selling you something. If you already know somebody that knows something, go to them, right? But I think that what you'll find is that you need the information. You need industry information, workforce information, land availability information, permitting information. You need information about what's happening in an industry. Give me a call, and we'll start it from there.
Thank you for being willing to share that. And it sounds like the way that it's gotten structured is by having these key partners, key assets, tools that are available inside of the collaborative of REALAZ, allows each of you to kind of help point to each other and help a business to try to get to the right spot. One area that I want to dig a little bit more on, credibility, and then I know we're getting short on time, but on credibility, and clean this up if you understand it differently, but I know that part of what the REALAZ board had talked about in the beginning was the importance of making sure that businesses, when they came to the area, knew how they would be treated and what they could expect when working with us. And that was really important to the REALAZ board, that while, for example, I may have businesses that I would love to see come here and other businesses that personally I may not really want to see come here. But I see a problem with that as well, though, because the business community, if they don't feel that they're welcome here and understand that this is America, this isn't China or Russia, this is America. And if they're following the rules, if they're doing the things that they're supposed to be, that they should have opportunity, and that we will credibly work with people and helping them to have information. Has that been your experience? That's my understanding from the REALAZ board and whatnot. Has that been your experience? And why does that matter if so?
There's a lot to unpack there, but at the end of the day, it's not an economic development's group. It's not their role to pick winners and losers. It's to showcase what's available and help to find that fit, right? So some communities like X, some communities are not going to like X, right? So I think in terms of how we receive businesses at REALAZ, we're open for business. And the thing that really proves that, though, is the local governments, right? The local governments' ordinances and the way in which their appetite for growth. And I'll share with you why this is really an important piece. Let's go back to the Zenny Home example. So a few months before they were ready to start, changing the ground site at their factory here, they says, well, geez, we need to make sure that these communities actually are interested in the growth that's going to happen because we come here. They recognize they're an acre industry. And so the REALAZ group, we had all of the mayors and the town and city managers meet for a dinner with the executive team from Zenny Home. Now, this was a really important piece because what it showed is that this is a business-friendly environment, that we've got communities that might be separated by an hour and a half drive times, right? All around this, but they're all coming and saying, hey, these are our plans for growth. These are our plans for housing. This is what we're in, right? But hearing that directly from the community leaders was really helpful in creating that, government-friendly environment, right? So I think that REALAZ has the ability to prove that to industry, that, our regions are looking for this growth, want this growth, and are willing to show up to advocate for it. Same thing happened on the workforce front. We had all the superintendents of all the schools come around saying, hey, this is our student population. These are the skills that we have. We're looking for opportunities for these guys to stay here, because I hear time and time again that we want our kids to stay here. We don't want our greatest export to be our children, right? If you want to protect the character of a community, keep the kids, right? don't have them leave to go somewhere else. And I think these leaders, these business, and local government leaders have identified that and says, hey, we want to keep the character of our community, but we know we need to keep our future generations here. We are supportive of businesses coming in.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's something that's deeply personal to me. I've shared numerous times that I remember my group of friends when we graduated from high school up here in Northeastern Arizona. And it was a common, like, hey, we're all going to move home. Hey, we're all going to make this a better place. And it's not that everybody didn't want to. It's just that everybody couldn't. And so really appreciate being with you here today, talking about economic development and looking for opportunities that really do allow our kids to be able to stay here in these communities. You can see it when you see the different community events, how many people come home, because home matters. And they see Northeastern Arizona and Navajo County and Apache County as home. So thank you for your efforts and what you do in economic development. We obviously have plenty more to talk about, and we should do another show where we talk more about that. But I think we're towards the end of it today. I just want to tell you, thank you so much for all that you do, Chris. It's always great to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity to have you kind of explain some of what's happening, the exciting things that are going on here in Navajo County. And we just appreciate what you do. And is there any final thing that you would say to any business owner that's considering or looking at potentially coming to this area?
One of the things that I've heard from many of our developers, every day I'm talking to a different developer from a different industry, and they say, gosh, you guys have everything laid out for us that we need to know in order to be there, to expand there. They didn't know it was until they got involved, right? Until they started like talking and kind of exploring the tools and made that relationship. So I'd say I'm always open to every business, every developer that wants to grow here or be here. The legal ones, right? Yeah. Only legal businesses. But at the end of the day, there is places that are better fit. I'll help you find those places that are better fit for your business. I'll help you with the resources. Those are available. We got those on our website. The thing is, when you're going into this is a big risk, right? Starting up a business, expanding a business. You want to make sure you got all the information you have. We've been collecting this for years, and it's available. And I'd be happy to share it with anybody. And then also kind of usher them along the process, right? And sometimes it might be some of our partners that are better ushers for their business. But the thing is, this is a great place to start. You'll find your people here quickly.
Chris, just a quick question for you as we wrap things up here. If you had something to say to an entrepreneur or a business owner that was looking to come to this area inside of 30 seconds, what would you say to them?
I'd say we're open for business here, and we can prove it. We've got the resources, we've got the tools, we've got the information that you need. So regardless of the industry, reach out to us and we'll hook you up with what you need to advance your project here. And we'll surround you with the people that are going to be important for your project going forward.
Love it. We're open for business. We want our kids to be able to live here, grow up here, and raise their families here. And Chris is going to help you to do that. So, well, thank you. Great answer. Grateful to have you here with us. Chris Pasterz, Navajo County Economic Development Director and REALAZ Executive Director. Phenomenal chance to be able to talk with you. Always a good conversation. Thanks for joining us at Navajo County Service Station, and we'll talk again. Thanks so much.